I'm very pleased to introduce today's guest speaker, Kathryn Getsky. I had to think there, Kathryn.
Yes.
um, who will be teaching us about how we can measure hope and bring hope into our daily lives. So welcome, Kathryn. Thank you so much for bringing this to us today, and I look forward to learning.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. Compassion is so closely tied to hope. And so I'm grateful to be here, and I'm grateful that so many people care about hope right now, especially in the US, but around the world, a lot of tumultuous times. And it's really important that we build our hope muscle right now. So I'm grateful to be able to share what I know with you all. My goal is to share what I know and then hopefully inspire you to start practicing hope skills in your own life and get connected in your own community and activated around hope. Again, because I believe it's such an important and essential skill, and so many don't know how to hope. And I set out on my journey to learn how to hope. And so I'm going to share a bit about that as well. Let me just get my presentation up. And this is also a Mentimeter, so it is participatory. Um, and so I would love for you all it's an active workshop. We're going to do a couple breakouts, but we'll say in advance, you don't have to do the breakout. If you want to stay in the room with me, you're welcome to, but we do have breakouts to connect more closely with folks in the workshop. So, all right, here we go. All right. So yeah, and it's about writing your own Shine Hope story, and we'll talk about what that is. But learning skills to activate hope in your life or lives of others. And then we'll also be asking some questions throughout the workshop. So in workshops, so encourage you to put in, and if you want to, the QR code goes to the Mentimeter where we ask the specific questions. So you can use that too. In the presentation. But my why, I want to go into that a bit first. So I'm in Napa right now. I was just at an incredible conference on workplace mental health. I've been in the global mental health space over 20 years. I'm a representative at the UN for the World Federation for Mental Health. We do the October 10th activation every year. And I grew up in Oak Park outside of Chicago, and that's actually where I live right now. I live in Chicago. And when I was 18, my dad died by suicide. And it was I was very close with him. He had a lot of challenges, but I was super close with him. He was a retail banker at the First National Bank of Chicago, taught me so much of what I know about business and retail. And so it was very hard on me. I left school. I was a freshman at the University of Iowa. I left school, thankfully went to some different schools and graduated. But unfortunately, then in my early 20s, I had my own suicide attempt. So I knew about suicide pretty deeply from personal experience. I also struggled with addiction, and found myself kind of going from one addiction to the next and really not getting to the root of what was happening. And so, but I got some support and help, and moved on. I worked for a number of companies. I launched my own brand and business over 20 years ago. And I found the marketing around mental health to be very depressing. So I saw mental health to have kind of a branding issue. We know that stigma is one of the top reasons people don't get support or treatment. And I saw that as really a negative brand. So I started my company Mood Lights and then started a nonprofit at that time, and initially set out to work to rebrand mental health. And it was several years into that I was in a suicide prevention training, and they were talking about restricting access to means and 800 numbers as primary kind of methods of suicide prevention. And I thought, that is so late in the problem. Like if you want to get to prevention, you really have to get to root cause. And across the literature, hopelessness came up as the single consistent predictor of suicide. It wasn't anxiety, it wasn't depression, it was really driven from hopelessness. And it's also the primary symptom of depression. And I thought, well, why don't I know what this is and how to navigate it and how to get to hope? And then I got into hope science, and it was so inspiring to me. I mean, they were measuring hope, which I thought was so cool. Like you could actually measure your hope, and they knew the higher in hope you were, all of these positive outcomes, which I'll share with you. But they weren't actually teaching you how to hope. And, when you go through challenging times or changes, it's like, how do you get back to hope when hope seems so far away? And that's how I felt in my youth. And I've been on that journey the last 13 years to figure that out. How do we actually hope? And, thankfully, I've been able to prove out that you can teach hope as a skill. And as we increase hope, symptoms of anxiety and depression decrease. And so I'm really grateful to be here today to share with you what I've learned on my journey and what I continue to learn around hope. So that's really kind of my background. Shine is the mnemonic we use, which we'll go through. So I like to share my favorite stress skills. It's really stress skills because I can't pick just one, but meditation has changed my life and prayer. And I also am very non-negotiable on some happiness habits, which include my exercise, my sleep. I eat 80% healthy foods, and I've also been in recovery for over 20 years. So I just want to go a little bit into hopelessness. So I wanted to get to hope from hopelessness. And when I started looking at the literature around hopelessness, kind of shocking and a bit scary, and especially some stats around where we are in the US right now. 57% of teens of teen girls identify with persistent hopelessness. And when you look at what hopelessness leads to, so many adverse consequences. So violence, it's the key predictor of violence, loneliness, hopelessness will predict loneliness, anxiety, depression, bullying, substance use, it even how long you live. And after the pandemic, 48% of Americans reported hopelessness, as I mentioned, the teen girls, and we do have a global mental health crisis as well. Done a lot of work globally, and we've studied this globally. So it's really important that we understand what hopelessness is. My goal is to normalize, to share what hopelessness is, what I've learned about it, to normalize it, and share how we manage those moments of hopelessness, whether they're just something like brief or something big. And even systemically. So when I looked at hopelessness, it was defined as, negative expectations towards oneself and towards one's future. I believe we can't get to hope until we first understand hopelessness. I think it's just an important part of the journey. And so, when I looked at hopelessness, it's both emotional, so you feel bad, so despair, you feel sadness, angry, afraid, and it's a helplessness to do anything about it. So you feel powerlessness. So it's the combination of those two things that really make up hopelessness. We talk a lot about despair. And to me, despair doesn't quite get to the root of the problem, because it's when you feel despair and I can't do anything about that despair, I'm never going to be able to change that despair, that it becomes a real issue. And so that's kind of what I'm talking about and what I learned about hopelessness. So I want to ask you all, and this is the participatory part. So what might you experience moments of hopelessness about? So if you think about it in life, so this is, you can either use the QR code, or you can go to menti.com, and the code is up on the screen, but it's 4859-9924. So again, it's 4859 and then 9924. If you can just think a moment and think about what you might experience a moment of hopelessness about, and then put in your responses. You can answer as many as you want. And I see breakthrough rooms. I love that idea. Very good. Marriage, health, your child, climate, job. Absolutely. What might else you experience moments of hopelessness about? So despair, helpless, work, motherhood, your kids' future, democracy, political future, lack of money, climate, disease, health, article rejections. Oh my gosh. Yes. I've had so many of those for hope. It's just like, I swear, doing this work on hope, it teaches me every day that I have to practice my skills. Peace, life, absolutely, safety, um, yeah, finances, disease. All right. So, and there are so many things that we can experience moments of hopelessness. We can get overwhelmed with our hopelessness, really. But I think it's really important to notice this, that it's, money. We all experience challenges, with money or with family, or with health, or with safety. I mean, these are all things, loneliness, a dictator. Absolutely. And when you think again about what hopelessness, it's despair. So you feel sad, angry, afraid, and helpless, like I can't do anything about it. Even things like emails from a supervisor could trigger a moment of hopelessness. I'm going to move on. So, or getting cut off in traffic. So for some people, that's like a big moment of hopelessness. They get into that road rage, because they can't control that other person in front of them. So it's my goal is to really normalize the conversation of hopelessness so that we can identify it and say, okay, this is what it is. Now, how do we get to hope? How do we get to hope? And so we know our moments of hopelessness increase when we have an illness, when we have financial challenges. The financial challenges are a big reason for suicide, actually, as well as divorce and breakups. But even things like moving, when you move, you're going to have your challenges are going to go up. So your stress response will be activated, and then you might feel helpless because you've just got more problems to solve, really. A breakup, failing grades is a big one, especially, for our kids. Death in the family, of course, you're going to feel sadness and then helpless because you can't bring that person back. So it's really about, to me, it's so important that we understand what hopelessness is. So then we learn how to get to hope. And that's where the SHINE framework comes in. And that's kind of how we teach hope. So when I developed my work on hope, I started with, I'm very logically driven. So I said, okay, if hopelessness is both emotional despair. So we got to figure out how to get from out of our despair to positive feelings. And we have to figure out how to move from helplessness to inspired actions. And so when I look at hope and when I talk about hope, I think of it as a vision for what I want in my future, that I'm fueling with feeling good and taking action. So, the two key ingredients of hope are we want to feel good and we want to actually take action. And so what I learned about hope is that it's measurable, it's changeable, it's teachable. I learned a lot of skills around hopelessness as a youth. I had to learn how to get to hope. So, and then the cool thing about hope, and we're going to measure our hope so that you all know what we're talking about when we talk about hope. But the great thing about hope is that the higher we can get people in hope, the higher we can get ourselves, the higher we can get people in our community, the higher we can get our children. They have a decreased risk of anxiety, depression, suicide, a decreased risk of loneliness, a decreased risk of developing chronic health conditions, and then all risky behaviors in youth, as well as violence. So we increase hope, we can actually address so many of these issues. And then we also know that higher hope impacts workplace productivity. So there are some great studies. We have a lot of studies and research on our website about studies that have been done around hope. So they've looked at hope, where you are in your hope, and how it impacts workplace performance, your ability to achieve goals. So when you think about hope, it's what you kind of want in life and your ability to take steps to get there. So goals are very related to hope. Hope impacts graduation rate. It impacts retention in the workplace and also in retention in school. It predicts productivity, resiliency, and health, and also athletic outcomes, which I use a lot with our work on youth. If you want to do well in sports, You need to learn how to be hopeful. Envision yourself making that goal and then know what steps you have to take to get there. So hope is it's very important. And again, it's teachable, it's a skill. So this is the hope scale. So there's both a children's hope scale and an adult hope scale. So I'm going to give you a few minutes to take this. I think it's really important to just kind of get a sense of how we measure hope. There are a few different scales for hope, but we use this because I like that it has a children's measure and an adult measure, and we do a lot of work with youth. So, the goal is to ensure everyone knows how to hope. So these scales give us that way to measure. So go ahead and take a few moments. Yes, I love this. I'll answer your questions too. Does hopelessness come from a lack of acceptance of what is and what is possible? I mean, and we can talk about some of these questions as we go through. I think hopelessness comes from just not knowing how to manage our despair and not knowing how to get out of helplessness to action. And we can revisit that after we go through this and I share what we know around hope and how we get to hope. But I believe it's a learned, like, we're just not managing our despair in healthy ways and we're not getting out of our helplessness into action. And thank you, Grace, for that wonderful comment about the presentation. So, and I'll give you, does anyone have can you all find the hope scale? Adult hope scale, children's hope scale. So if you're above, thank you for putting that in, Rachel. If you're above 16, take the adult hope scale. Thank you, Emmanuel. So Olivia, the hope scales are in the chat. So you can use the QR codes or they're also, let's see, there you go. Put them in the chat as well. It's a question, and you don't have to answer all of the survey data. We're doing, like, we use some of it for research, so you don't have to answer all that. You can just answer the scale questions and then put in your name, your email. You'll get your results emailed to you, and you'll also get a score at the end when you click to the end. I'll give you a few more minutes, and if you have any challenges, just put them in the chat. Yes, I think you have to put in your email, and I think you don't have to check your email, but I think you have to put in your email, your name, and then click to the next screen, and then it should give you your score. Let me know if that works. Hi, Mohammed. We are measuring our hope. So the QR codes are there and the link to how to measure your hope. So we're doing that right now. I'll just put another link. That is the hope scale. And while I'm here, I'm also gonna upload Shine Hope story template that you all can have. Yeah, we don't measure the hopeless. We don't use the hopelessness scale. There are hopelessness scales. We do them in research, but I don't do them. I like to focus on hope. Like, I think it's really important to have an understanding of what hopelessness is. And then I want to focus on how do we get to hope. So that's really the main scale we focus on, especially in the work in general, is our hope. So it didn't work. Interesting. Did anyone else get their hope score? It worked for Carrie. Yeah, it should work. Yes. You got lost in the second page. If you just put your name and email and then forward through. Mine worked. Yay. Well, I can help people later if it didn't work. You just gotta yeah, click submit after the questions. Hit submit and then it should pop up your score. So got it. Amazing. All right, so let's see where everyone is. And this is what I want to say on your hope score. Like we move all over the place on hope, depending on what's happening in our lives, depending on what's happening in the world. Hope is not an easy, it's a simple, what I've learned, it's a simple construct. We have a simple construct for how we teach hope, but it's not easy. When you think about all of the challenges we have in life and all of the systemic things that happen, hope is a process and it's learning how to get skilled at hope. So amazing. You can put just where, we don't need to know your individual scores, but just put on the chart where you fall in your hope score. So we get a sense of where everyone is. I won't know who is where, but I love to get a sense of where the group is on hope overall, where people are falling on their hope scores. And again, it's, and I also think like we don't teach how to hope. So how are people supposed to know how to hope unless we actually teach them skills to improve their hope? So amazing. If you want to put in the specific ratings, what category you fall in. So basically below 40 is lower in hope, 40 to 47 is hopeful, 48 to 55 is higher hope, and then 56 or higher is considered high hope. So that's kind of, just to get a sense, that's how we're measuring hope. And again, a lot of things that are happening in the world and in our lives impact where we are on hope. And so that's why, again, it's not easy, but it's you've got to learn and you've got to cultivate and practice these skills. So what is the exercise, please? Right now, we're just measuring our hope. We're learning where we are on hope. So amazing. So I love that we have some high in hope and moderate, and I don't see any low hope yet, which I don't think I've ever done a group where nobody is low in hope. So, but just know that no matter where you are in hope, it's okay. And it's important to know where we are. And I say, so we have to learn how much we have to shine, because shine is how we practice and how we teach to practice the skills on hope. So I'm going to go ahead and jump ahead and share what the shine is. So thank you all for taking that and just getting a check-in on where you are in hope. So shine is how we actually teach skills to hope. And I'm going to go through each one of these individually, but just to share the mnemonic. And I also put in the chat a document that has this infographic with all of these links, the 90-second pause, the belly, but these are all clickable links. And you can learn more about each of these things and how this kind of the science behind them. So everything we do is really grounded in science, and we continue to study and learn as we go. So shine is a mnemonic. So we talk about stress skills, happiness habits, inspired actions, nourishing networks, and how we eliminate challenges, which again are those negative thinking patterns that get in the way of our ability to hope. And our goal is just to learn about all of these and then to start practicing these skills in our life. And again, the lower we are in hope, the more we want to practice these skills and bring these skills in. And again, it's not only impacts your own ability to hope, but your ability to share with others kind of how to hope. So I like to say we all have a shine hope story. So we're going to have a choice in the next slide. We can either look at a past experience we've had and we can think about how hope played into that, what things we did to navigate that experience. Because what we know about hope is thinking about a challenge we've had in the past and knowing the specific steps we took and the skills we used make us more likely when we have future challenges to be able to navigate that challenge. Because what we're doing by writing our past story is we're building our efficacy. We're building our belief in ourselves and belief that we can kind of do hard things, overcome challenges, and find our way. So you can either do a shine hope story on the past, or you can think about something you're hopeful about and write about how you're going to get there, how you're going to use these specific skills and strategies to actually get there. So I'm going to ask you on the next slide, would you rather write about your shine hope story on a past challenge, or do you want to write it about a future hope? What do you guys think? Let's think about what we want to focus on. So again, if you want to vote, a future hope. Awesome. And if we only have one vote, we'll use that. So let me know. A future hope, what you're hopeful for. Okay, awesome. I love it. Okay, we have one for what past challenge. And we have a 0, which wasn't, it's either 1 or 2. So we can vote. And you can also, you can also do what you want, but when we do breakout rooms, we'll talk about the stress skills we're using and whatnot. So, and you can, always feel free to do what you prefer to write about. So, okay, it looks like future hope is kind of winning. So I'll focus like kind of talking about future hopes. But again, if you want to work on your past challenge and think about how you navigated that, you are more than welcome to do so. Okay, so the downloadable PDF, you can download that if you want, or you can just take notes on a piece of paper or type in a computer and make notes. But we're going to go through how we write our Shine Hope story. So this is how we do that. So the first paragraph, and I've used my Shine Hope story as an example, but it can be any challenge we have had. In any challenge we've had in the past or something we're hopeful for in our future. So what is something, again, a challenge you've overcome in the past, or it could be addiction, it could be a financial, it could be a breakup, it could be a grade, it could be a move, it could be COVID, everyone has had a challenge. Or what are you hopeful for in your future? Is it job related? Is it health related? Is it a relationship? Is it, moving? So let's take a minute. I'm just going to give you a minute and think about what you would like to do. And I would like you to take a minute to just kind of this first paragraph here, if you can see, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but it's right next to the box. The box is where you would kind of draw an image of yourself. The sunflower is where you put your name, and then right underneath that line, you kind of write about. So you write about, again, past challenge or a future hope. I want you to take a minute and really think about either that past or that future, and write about what that is for you. You can write again on your paper or the document we sent. Can it be several simultaneously? I would suggest focusing on one. So you really learn how on one specific thing how that hope work plays into that. But you could write a million. After we're done, I want to take you through the process of just one. And then after you're done, you can do as many as you want. So I'm going to give you a minute to do that. Yes, I will re-upload the PDF.
It's okay, Kathryn. I've got it.
Okay, how are we doing? Are we good on that? Did you get something written down? Think about what you want to focus on. Okay, now we're going to go through the SHINE framework and how we apply hope to that. So, it's interesting, and hope scientists don't, this brings in kind of my mental health. And when you think back to the hope matrix, I want to solve hope from hopelessness. And so hope scientists do a lot of work on goals, agency, direction, and pathways. And I bring in that kind of hopelessness, despair component, because I think it's a really important component of hope that often doesn't get addressed. And so when I looked at despair initially, I looked at, okay, what is despair really? So it's emotional. So it's sadness, it's anger or fear. And so how do we manage our despair in healthy ways? And so when you look at, again, think about the hope matrix, despair and helplessness, this is really how we manage our despair. And I managed my despair in incredibly unhealthy ways in my youth. And that's what really led to a lot of the challenges. And so this is why, I think stress skills are so important. And what we found is they're so important to hope. So, we have this physiological response to triggers in our environment. And when we're triggered by things externally, we go into fight, flight, or freeze, or fawn mode. And we get these stress hormones are released in our bodies. So adrenaline, cortisol, norepinephrine. What we teach our kids and what we talk about is we go into our downstairs brain. And, our hope really lies in our frontal lobe and our upstairs brain. And so when we're in that stress response, it becomes very hard to hope. And not only that, we can really blow up so many things in our lives when we're in that downstairs brain and when we're triggered. And so learning about this physiological response is super important. Jill Bolt Taylor wrote My Stroke of Insight. It's an incredible book, and it talks about how it takes a full 90 seconds once from the last point of trigger for those stress hormones to cycle through your body to where you can get calm again and get access to that critical thinking and problem solving. And that's why we really focus on learning first about the stress response and what happens to the brain when we're overflooded in those stress hormones. And so, when we talk about hope and when we teach hope, we have a lesson on really thinking about what are our triggers, what's triggering us right now, and how are we proactively managing those triggers in healthy ways as opposed to unhealthy ways. And there are a number of ways to do that. So the 90-second rule, to me, if the whole world could just focus on this 90-second rule, and when we were triggered, if we learned how to take that pause before we reacted and responded, it would be so incredibly helpful. But we also talk about breathing techniques. So doing deep belly breathing. I used to get incredibly stressed around speaking in public. And what I realized is it would trigger a fear response. I would stop breathing, and then I wouldn't have access to my oxygen, and then my body would go into a bigger fight or flight. So I wouldn't be able to, it would just be activated. When I learned how to start intentionally breathing as I was about to be speaking or presenting or talking, I was able to completely reverse that fight or flight response that my body would get into. Learning how to meditate is really important, and is super helpful and has been life-changing for me because it taught me that I didn't have to respond and react to everything that happened. I remember I was in a meditation in a group. It was a group meditation, and everyone was super still and silent. And I was sitting there and I had an itch, and it was a really big itch, but I could feel the energy in the room was so silent. And I thought, what if I just observed this itch move across and didn't actually react? And I did that, and I noticed it shifted and changed its shape and moved a little bit on my leg and then disappeared. And that was so simple and yet so life-changing for me because I thought, wow, I have control over my reactions. I don't have to respond to everything. Sleep is super important for our hope. If we're not getting adequate sleep, we can get super, triggery. Our stress hormones go up. Visualization, journaling, exercise is a great stress skill. Engaging our senses, so feeling, touching, tasting something when we're in our head. Get using our senses to get in the present moment. Doing gardening. We use the sunflower as the international symbol for hope. And one of the reasons is because gardening is such a great exercise for managing those stress hormones. And also even just time near water. And it's great because science is catching up with all of these things and able to share exactly why and how they're so important. So, that's our first key to hope. And, when we're in challenging times, being really proactive about managing our stress, because the more stress hormones we have, the more we can be reactive. The reaction time can decrease. And so, stress is a part of life and we actually need some stress. So we want to have some stress to keep us motivated and energized, but it's when we have too much stress that it becomes a challenge. And I don't know how I made that green line on the screen, but it's hilarious. I must have drawn that at some point. Yeah, so we want some cortisol. It helps the body cope with stress. It increases our alertness and our energy levels, but we don't want too much cortisol and we don't want to be flooded with that stress response. And so there are healthy ways to get our stress, and then there are stress hormones, and then there are unhealthy ways. And we really want to focus on, if we're needing more energy, that we're doing healthy things to get our stress hormones, but then again, that we're managing the flooding of stress hormones in our body. So this just really kind of goes through the 90-second pause and what happens to our brain and how we get flooded with those stress hormones. And when you think about it, you can build an amazing life. And if you don't learn how to manage that 90-second pause, you can really destroy things in just a second. I think of kind of what Will Smith, what happened at it was the Oscars, but how he was triggered. You could see him go into his downstairs brain and you could see him go on stage and he wasn't present. He was flooded in that stress response. And I think that's an important example of how, we've got to learn how the stress hormones make us feel and then how to navigate them. This is our downstairs brain. Our kids also tell us, I'm really good now at knowing not just when I'm in my downstairs brain, but when other people are in their downstairs brain. And so to me, having compassion, we're talking about compassion, but having compassion when other people are in their downstairs brain, being able to recognize it and being able to give them time and space before you engage or, react. I did not know how to do that as a child. I was always trying to fix everything, to solve everything. I couldn't let things just be. And my dad was in his downstairs brain a lot. And I just didn't know how to, I oftentimes made it worse by what I was doing, not intentionally, and also not understanding at all what was happening. So This is where we're going to head into breakouts. Again, you don't have to go into breakouts. I encourage you to do so. It's courageous. Hope is courageous. My friend Scarlett teaches love, and she talks about courage being the first key to really love, like taking that courageous step. And I was in a conference where we did a lot of breakouts this week, and it was really helpful. And it's helpful to connect and to brainstorm and to ideate. So the first thing we're going to head into breakouts, and there are two breakouts. The first thing we're going to head in, and when you think about, you can use your past example if you want. Think about what your triggers were, and then what stress skills you used to navigate them. Were you really proactive about using stress skills to navigate that situation? Or for what you hope for in your future, what stress skills are you going to commit to using to navigate the challenges that are going to arise? Because, triggers are a part of life. So think about the triggers that may get you going or may activate that stress response, and think about what stress skills you're going to use to navigate that. So do we have any questions before we head into breakout? Oh, I love that quote. All of humanity's problems stem from man inability to sit quietly in a room alone. Absolutely. Hello from Bangladesh. Oh, we got the green line removed. Thank you. I don't, let's see. Okay. So any questions about the breakouts? Okay, I think Rachel and her team are going to help getting people into breakouts. And brainstorm. The idea is, I'll say this too. The idea, I would spend about a minute each sharing, 30 seconds maybe each sharing. We're going to send you into groups of 4 or 5. 30 seconds of sharing what triggers might be, and then 30 seconds, what skills are you going to use to navigate those, to be proactive? Because to me, when we share together, and we do this weekly in our team meetings, I learn other stress skills that people are using that are helpful, and I start using them. So I've gotten great ideas about stress skills from being open to, what's going to stress me out and how am I going to navigate those. So we'll do a 5-minute breakout and then bring you back, and then we'll learn what everyone is doing. So I want you to share with everyone, what are your favorite stress skills? So hopefully you took a minute to jot down some notes, but what are the stress skills? I mean, we talked about affirming beliefs, meditation, breathing. What are things that work for you all, though, for your triggers? Like, how do you manage your triggers, or how are you committing to managing your triggers in healthier ways? One of the triggers that was mentioned a few times is I love reframing can be important, yoga, walking, and you can also put them in the Menti if you want, the 48599924. You don't have to. You can also just put them in the chat and I'll reach them out. World events can be so triggering. And so to me, because that can like get you frozen, that can keep you in a state of hopelessness. Because again, if you think about hopelessness, it's despair and helplessness. If you're focused on the world events, you're going to stay in persistent hopelessness because there's not much you can control, that helplessness component of there's a lot you can't control about it. But what you can do is you can think about what in the world events with the world is most triggering to you. And you can understand that's likely what you care most about. That's what you're most passionate about. And then you can think, how can I have impact? How can I play a role in that? One of the questions was, how do I, finding my passion and purpose is a hope, is a goal. To me, if we look at our triggers, that can actually lead us to our passion, because that can teach us what we really, really care about. And if we can learn to manage our despair, our sadness, anger, fear around that, and actually channel those in healthy ways to actually action, to create goals around what we want to do in that space, using our triggers is a great way to figure that out. We also have a strengths finder that I'll share in the next one, but we can also use to dive into our strengths. So let's look at the stress skills. Being in the sea, a walk in nature, laughing, music, meditation, breathing, animals, pause, cat cuddles, reframing, cognitive diffusion. Love that. Sitting quietly, find the silver linings, walking in the park, talking nonsense. Maybe that's me. No, but I love that. Mindfulness, be silent, be outdoors, running, breathing. So the more stressors you have, the more challenges you have, the more you have to be doing the things that help you manage those triggers in healthy ways. Because when we get our over stressed, that's when we get sick. That's when our immune system decreases. That's when we become susceptible to illness, all of these things. So really important. And this is, again, how we manage that despair part of that hope matrix. So I love that. Okay, so, and hopefully in your group, you jotted down some notes of either what stress skills do you use to navigate the challenge in the past, because you want to think, again, good to write about the past and also good to write about a hope for the future. What stress skills are you going to use to get to where you want to go? Because we've got to take responsibility of our stress and our triggers, and we've got to be proactive about managing them. Okay, so the H is happiness habits. There are so many ways to get our happy hormones. We have our stress hormones and we have our happy hormones. And our happy hormones keep us in that upstairs brain. And, I stopped doing so much of what created those happy hormones in healthy ways after I lost my dad. And so it's so important to become aware that we are, dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, endorphin producing machines. We have the ability to create these hormones in us, and we've got to learn how to do that. And again, do it in healthy ways, because as you'll see, we can do them in healthy ways and we can do them in unhealthy ways. And so what we know, the evidence, morning routines can be super important for producing these. Utilizing our strengths. If you don't think you have any strengths or aren't aware of what your strengths, there's something called the Strengths Finder that's underneath our Hope, our Shine Hope score, and that's another scale you can do. Now, I wouldn't do it now; it takes a while to do, but it'll give you your 5 top strengths, and doing what we're good at can generate those positive hormones. Also, exercise, invigorating music, nature, playing an instrument, singing, doing art, smiling. Smiling releases endorphins. Even if you don't want to smile, when you smile, you can actually release endorphins. Setting goals. So when we set goals and then when we actually check things off, that actually releases these positive chemicals and hormones in our body that we need to feel good. Gratitude, purposeful living, volunteering, spending time with family and friends, connections, experiencing moments of wonder and awe. And faith, if you're connected with faith, playing games, pursuing your passion, these are all things that generate these happiness habits. And so to me, if you're really stressed, you want to be extra proactive and working hard to make sure you get these happiness hormones in healthy ways. And again, there are healthy ways to get them and unhealthy ways. And a lot of people get their happy hormones in very unhealthy ways. It's amazing to me that we can get our dopamine from drug and alcohol use or excessive social media or risky behaviors. And if we're doing that, we're trying to feel better, but we're just doing them in very unhealthy ways. So learning how to get a healthy diet or do creative activities, accomplishing goals, utilizing your strength. These are all healthy ways to get these happy hormones. And, we have programs for young kids, and it's so important that we learn, even compulsive shopping, even violence produces endorphins. So kids that are violent, they want to feel better and they're feeling better in the moment, but that's not a healthy, long-term, sustainable way to get your happy hormones. So this chart I feel is really helpful. And we want to teach kids and we want to practice ourselves the healthy way to get these happiness, because we need these happy hormones. I mean, they're what keep us in that upstairs brain, keep us collaborating, problem solving. So what are your non-negotiable happiness habits? I suggest everyone have non-negotiable happiness habits. these things, these healthy practices, these way we're going to get these happy habits. And so when you think about with what you hope for, you're going to need to stay in that upstairs brain, because your upstairs brain is where you can problem solve, collaborate with others, and really make progress towards what you hope for in life. So what happiness habits are you going to commit to practicing and cultivating? You can put those on the screen. You can put them on the chat. Again, it's menti.com, code 48599924. Lots of sleep. Sleep is so important. You know, I myself get exhausted doing this hope work at times because I so want to have an impact and I work so hard and my brain's always working. And getting sleep is critical because it gets me, you know, I wake up the next day feeling refreshed, feeling ready to tackle the many challenges, having a morning routine. Values, yes, it's super important. Staying connected and committed to your values, using your values. That is a really good one. Time outdoors, eating, social connections, absolutely. You know, and we talked about, you know, some folks, what they hope for is better connections. Like when you move into a community, a new community, and you don't know anyone, it can be hard and it can be so easy to get into that state of despair and helplessness. And so I look at, let's create a goal and a Shine Hope story for making new connections. And let's see what it's going to actually take to get there. How are we going to manage our stress hormones? What ways are we going to get happiness habits? We might not be able to get them right now through in-person connections, but we want to use these other ways to get our happy hormones. And then we'll go through next how we set actually goals to get to where we want to go. Lots of sleep, time with my dog, music, values, amazing. So it's really important to make these non-negotiable, you know, to have things that you commit to doing consistently to take care of yourself. For me, no alcohol, getting sober was super important in my commitment to staying healthy. And so I've made that commitment for a long time. Okay, we'll go on to the next. So you can jot these down, write these down on your sheet or on your piece of paper. And it's really important if you want to, if you overcame a challenge in the past, you likely, you used happiness habits. What were the ones that worked for you? Take note of that, write those down, because when you're in crisis, it's hard to think about anything that works. But if you can go back and look at the story and look at these are the things that I know I need to do to get those happy hormones, it's really helpful. And then if you hope for something in your future, you want to commit to practices that are going to help you get there. Focus on gratitude, solitude. I love solitude. That's a great one. It's super important to my happiness as well. Mushroom outfits that bring you joy and smile. What we wear, our clothes, absolutely. All really great ideas. Love it. So inspired actions is the I in Shine, and that's how we set our goals, how we overcome obstacles to goals, and knowing how to re-goal. Just a few things I'll share on this. We're up to 95% more likely to achieve what we hope for if we write it down and then we find someone to check in regularly on it. And there's lots of ways to do that. We have an online depression and anxiety support group for people that and you can make connections there. There are lots of online groups that can help you. But checking in with a friend or a family member or, you know, somebody, finding someone, a therapist that you can connect with regularly to help check in on progress towards what you want is going to make you much more likely to achieve it. So when you think about what you want in your future, it's important that you actually write it down, concretize it, and then you check in with someone regularly to share your progress, your challenges, just to really keep you accountable. When I look at goals and what I hope for in life, the SMART goal process is a helpful way for me to weed out things that are unattainable, so that that it's not healthy for me to hope for because I can't make it happen. So the SMART goal is looking at things that are specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time bound. Measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. And that's just a way to get a sense, is what I'm hoping for actually realistic? Is it possible? Now, I always say you want to have some stretch goals as well, some like big, bold, bodacious goals that are very challenging and stretch you and you may or may not meet. But it's also important to have some SMART goals so that you're actually kind of achieving things in your life. And then the other thing you want to do is you want to step the process. You want to do the specific things you're going to need to do, the specific steps you're going to take to actually get to your goal. It's a super important process to go through because if we want, if we want to meet a health goal, we're actually going to need to think through what are the actual things I'm going to need to take to get there. And so when you think of getting out of helplessness and into action, chunking down steps, taking one small step at a time, and then knowing we're going to hit those obstacles and we're going to need to re-goal is a super important component of learning how to hope and how we re-goal and how we manage the triggers of our challenges and then how we keep on our way and our path to there. And then again, mentioning regoaling, knowing when to regoal. I had this vision of my future where my dad was going to be, and I had to essentially re-goal. I couldn't have him, but I could have other father-like figures in my life. So I had to think about what were the needs my dad was meeting and how can I get those needs met and essentially re-goal and create new strategies for how I was going to make that happen. And so, but if I had a hope and a goal of having my dad here, that kept me stuck in that sense of despair and the helplessness. And so again, learning how to do this and applying it to whatever challenge is super important. So we're going to head into breakout rooms. I want you to talk about the specific steps you're going to take. Either you're going to take for what you hope for, or you took to overcome a challenge you navigated in the past. What were the specific things you did? I mean, think about like if someone else with the same challenge were reading it, you're giving them a roadmap for how to navigate. So we'll head into breakouts now. 5 minutes. So hopefully you wrote about the inspired actions either you took in the past or you're going to take to get to where you want to go. But that is the thing about hope. Hope takes action, right? We think of hope as just kind of a wish, but it's actually something we have to take action for. And so learning different ways to take action is super important. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time in this one. Nourishing networks is the N, and it's really important that we cultivate healthy and strong bi-directional networks in our lives. And again, if you don't have a strong network, totally okay. Have that be one of your goals, one of the things you focus on, one of the things you actually strategize on. How can I get stronger relationships, or how can I create a healthy relationship? We know everyone needs at least one person in their life to count on. And so maybe you have a goal around, I need to make a connection in my life. Super important. Yes, hope and compassion, absolutely take action. The 5-to-1 rule is really interesting. I'll just touch on that. It takes 5 compliments to have healthy relationships. We need to say 5 positive things for every criticism, a negative thing we kind of point out about someone. So if you want healthy relationships, pay attention to that, as it's it can be challenging as we often can say things can recognize because of negative bias, the things we don't like or aren't appreciating. And it's really important to compliment and acknowledge what we do like and make sure to keep aware of that ratio. But in your Shine Hope story, you would write, who was in my life? What were they doing? Were they recognizing? Were they being kind to me? Were they showing me empathy? Right. Get specific about who the people in your life that helped you navigate it, or who are the people you're gonna need to create relationships with to get you to what you hope for. Because relationships are so key to that. And even if it's just identifying one person that you can connect with on a regular basis to kind of help you achieve what it is you want, super important. And then we touched briefly on forgiveness, but forgiveness is part of the process of life, learning how to forgive, when to forgive, let go. It's not that we need to bring everyone back into our life, but forgiveness can be very healing for the self. And I learned a lot from Scarlett Lewis, who lost her son Jesse in the Sandy Hook shooting, and she has created a Choose Love movement that I'm inspired by always. And courage is the first part, and forgiveness is a big part of the love equation, and compassion and action. So super important. Nourishing networks are critical for hope. So the fifth one is eliminating challenges, which are the negative thinking patterns that get in the way of our ability to hope. These can kind of like derail whatever it is we want. And again, when we think back to that hopelessness being despair and helplessness, when we try to control things outside of our control, that can just keep us in that helplessness and a part of hopelessness. And so learning where is our locus of control in this situation? What do we have power over? What can we take action on? It's super important to think through that. Also limiting beliefs, like what our mind tells us that limits us can just derail hope. And so being aware of what our limiting beliefs are and how we can replace those with affirming beliefs is super important. All our negative thinking can be, the world is horrible. That's kind of that all or nothing thinking that can just kill our hope. Rumination, when we ruminate, think over and over again about things that happened in the past. Again, learning to stop that with getting into the present moment, using our stress skills or happiness habits to kind of stop the cycle of rumination as well as worry. I think 80 to 90% of what we worry about never happens. So learning how to stop our cycles of worry, get back into the present moment. Also, attaching to outcomes can kill our hope, because if we get too attached to something happening, this happens with a lot of athletes. If they get injured, they get into this state of hopelessness. But it's important that we go for something, but we don't depend on that happening to fulfill our needs. So we often say happiness is the journey to the goal, and it's being present and engaged in the present moment. It's not actually achieving that goal, achieving what we hope for. It's how we feel along the way. And then a negative bias, or a tendency to see things kind of negatively, into confirmation bias. Like we have our opinion, and then we see that and we reaffirm that through looking for the points that reinforce that belief. So becoming aware of these challenges, these things that our brain does, and then how we navigate and overcome them is the last and final key to hope, and the E in the process. So that's out of place. So think about, what challenges you eliminated as you went. Like, what are your biggest? Everyone has like the things they do the most. I used to attach to outcomes a lot. I used to try to control things outside of my control a lot. So think about how you navigated your challenges, what the specific things you did in the past, or what your challenges are going to be in the future for what you hope for, and how you're going to be proactive about navigating them. So that's the final part of the story that you'll write about. And then kind of the message you want to send, I guess, to the world, or about a challenge you had in the past, or to yourself. Or again, if you're writing about something you want in your future, what do you want to say? Like, what's that going to feel like to you? What's the experience you're going to have? What are you going to get from achieving that? How are you going to feel? What are you going to be thinking? So that's the final part of writing your story. I know we're just about at time. So you can do that on your own. I'm going to leave just a second for questions. Sorry, I should have more time, but retirement, Nico says retirement has, sorry, I can't see. Yeah, nourishing. I mean, when you're feeling lonely, like, to me, that's where you set up a goal around how am I going to make connections? Like, it's good to notice that we're experiencing loneliness, but then we want to get out of that. So to get out of, the more we ruminate on our loneliness or believe we're always going to be lonely. I mean, the belief that I'm always going to be lonely is that limiting belief. So affirming belief might be, I've made connections in the past. I've had friends in the past. And then what are the specific steps you're going to have to take to make connections in your community? So thanks for attending theater. So that's the process, and we won't go to that, but that's kind of the process for writing your Shine Hope story and getting out of helplessness into action, out of despair into positive feelings. Dr. Love loves ecstatic dance. That's amazing. We have a lot of programs. I will say July 12th, we got an International Day of Hope passed at the UN. So there's an International Day of Hope website. You can sign up for updates on that International Day of Hope. I'm very excited. We want to elevate hope science really all over the world, get people understanding that it's easy to get into hopelessness and we got to learn how to get to hope. And this is how we measure hope. And these are skills and ways we can cultivate hope in our lives. We're working to try to create kind of a global movement around hope and the messaging. So yeah, you can put in a one-word check-in at the end if you want. You can put any questions. I'm happy to stay a few minutes after if anyone has questions. The Strengths Finder is on that Shine Hope, the link for the Shine Hope scales. If you go scroll down below the scales, you'll find a link out to the Strengths Finder. You can help you identify your 5 strengths. It's really fascinating. Gallup did research that hope is the number one need of followers for any leaders. Can this chat be saved? I'm not sure. Can the chat be saved? I think so. Hope springs
I think
eternal.
this, if you press on the 3 dots in the corner, you should be able to download the chat, I think.
Awesome. So did that work? If you press the 3 dots in the corner, you can save the chat. I'm saving the chat. The International Day of Hope is July 12th. I'll put a link to that. You can sign up on our website for updates on what we're going to be doing. Again, we're going to encourage people to plant sunflowers, to measure their hope, to spread the word about hope. We'll do an event at the UN on the 11th that will be televised, and we'll keep people updated on it. And I'm just so grateful, first to Compassion for hosting this and for sharing and spreading the word on hope. Hope and compassion are so closely tied together. I believe hope, love, and compassion. Compassion is the bridge between hope and love. That's what we often talk about, but it's really critical. And yeah, these are skills we all need. So I'll put my email too in the chat. You're welcome to reach out to me anytime. And again, so grateful to you all for attending. Whoops.
Well, thank you, Kathryn. That was really stimulating. There's a lot of amazing pathways we can go down and think about in terms of, what we can do to help ourselves on a daily basis. So I'm really personally looking forward to going through my Shine Hope story. So I'd recommend if anyone else didn't get a chance to go through it thoroughly today, then just do, set a little date with yourself, get your journal out and go through it. I think it's really worth digging into.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. Yeah, and it's a process. I always say it's not easy and it takes our commitment to it and our own work, It's easy to get stuck in those patterns and cycles, and so it's a process. So be gentle with yourself in the journey. And we have programs for young kids and they're doing them all over the world. And, I will never not let anyone have access for fun. So just reach out to me and I can give you access to our programs if you want to teach hope in your community and we'll be giving a lot of resources for the International Day of Hope, Parents Guide, how to use hope language at home, programming for kids. So yeah, thank you so much.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. And we'll be sending the email with the recording and some resources for you to kind of follow up and dig in more to this. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you, Kathryn, and hope to see you all again very soon.
Sounds great. Thank you, everyone.
Bye. You can unmute and say goodbye if you'd like.